What I'd like you to do now is to pick up your pen and paper or notebook, and on the top of a page, I want you to write, I should. And then I want you to finish that sentence in at least a half a dozen ways. Turn the tape off now and do that. And when you've finished, come back and we'll continue. Write I should on the top of the page, and then finish it at least 6 or 7 times. All right, now that you have your list made, what I would like you to do is to read off each one on the list by itself, saying, I should. And then my question to you is, why? This is not to make you wrong in any way, but just to have you look at something in a different way. So you may say, I should get up early in the morning. My question is, why? And then I want you to look inside yourself to find the answers. Do this with each should on your list. If you can do this exercise with a partner, even better. When you're finished with the list and made a note of your answers so that you remember them, then come back to me and we'll go further. I believe that should is one of the most awful words in the English language, because every time we use the word should, we are in effect saying wrong. Either you were wrong, or you are wrong, or you're going to be wrong. And I don't think we need to be made wrong. I think we need to be right, or at least come from a position of choice, because all of life is choice, and we want to be aware of that. So I would like to take the word should and put it in the wastebasket, or throw it in the fire, or in the trash, or whatever you want to do. Remove it from your vocabulary forever. And replace it with the word could, because could gives us choice. Now it is true that sometimes it might be better for us to do something, but basically we still have choice, and if we don't do it, at least we're not wrong. So what I want you to do now with this exercise is to reread your should list one at a time, only this time I want you to say, if I really wanted to, I could. If I really wanted to, I could get up early in the morning. And then my question to you is, so why don't you, or why haven't you? And again, this is not to make you wrong, but to let you look at your shoulds and see how you really feel about them. So again, you can turn the tape off for a few moments and go through this process. If I really wanted to, I could. And so why haven't you? And when you've finished, come back. Now tell me, what did you learn? You know, most of us are so strict about our shoulds. There's such rigid rules in our lives. And most of them have to do with things that we either don't want to do, or we don't like to do, or are not us. And we find often when we go over this should list that we've been angry at ourselves for years because we don't do something that we don't want to do to begin with, or it was never our idea, or it was someone else's should. Perhaps the reason you've not done something on your should list is because you were afraid to do so. Now, instead of being bad, we find that you are only frightened. And this is a very different issue to work with. See, I like to take things off the should list. In fact, I like to remove them completely. What we can do is have them be choices. We could do them if we really wanted to. And if we're not doing them, then we probably don't want to do them, and we don't have to do them. So let's not try. Let's not berate ourselves. Let's not belittle ourselves for it anymore. This one little tiny exercise can show us so much about ourselves. So what can be dropped now from your should list? The next thing we want to do is to see where we are on the ladder of self-love. Now, I'm not talking about vanity and arrogance, because that is not love. That's a form of fear. I am talking about respect and acknowledgement for this beautiful being that we are. What we want to look at this point is how we do not love ourselves. And we do this by scolding ourselves, by criticizing ourselves, by creating pain for ourselves, emotional and physical. We don't love ourselves by mistreating our bodies. Sometimes we misuse food or alcohol or drugs. Sometimes we don't love ourselves by believing that we are unlovable, or by procrastinating, or choosing people that mistreat us. And sometimes we don't love ourselves by creating debt and burden. And sometimes, well, we all have so many ways. What are your ways of not loving yourself? Think about that. Make a note of it. You could again turn off the set and make a list of the ways that you do not love yourself. Any denial of our good is not loving ourselves, and we can do that in so many different ways. You know, I once had a client who wore glasses and often wore contact lenses, and we weren't even working to improve her vision, but we were working to release some old pattern in her life that was really limiting her. And one day we had a big breakthrough, and the next day when she got up and she put on her contact lenses, they were bothering her. So she took them out, and her vision was absolutely clear. She could see everything perfectly. And she spent the whole day saying, I don't believe it, I don't believe it, I don't believe it. And the next day, she was back to wearing her lenses. You see, the universe will back up whatever we say. And when good comes into our life and we deny it, this is an act of not loving ourselves. And we literally push it away. Sometimes we have a partner who's tired or grouchy, and we think that something's wrong with us. Or our marriage ends, and we believe it's all our fault, and that we're not good enough. Or we have 1 or 2 dates with somebody and they never call again. And again, we think something is wrong with us. Sometimes we're afraid to ask for a raise, or our bodies may not match the latest fashions, and we think we're not good enough. Or we don't make the sale, or we don't get the part, and we think we're not good enough. Or we may have a fear of intimacy, and so we wind up having no sex or anonymous sex. How do you express your lack of self-esteem? Think about it. It's not that we're wrong or bad people. It's just that we're looking at what we'd like to change. And we all have things about us that could be changed if we want to make our lives work better. When we were little tiny babies, we knew the perfection of our being. We knew how wonderful we were. You look at any tiny baby and you see how wonderful they are. They're full of love and they're full of life, and they ask for what they want and they express their feelings freely. When a little baby is angry, not only do you know it, the entire neighborhood knows it. And yet, 2 minutes later, their smile can light up a room because they express and it's over. And they always live in the now. And they reach out and ask for what they want. They're fabulous little babies. And they love their bodies from the top of their head all the way to the tip of their toes. They have no shame and no guilt. And they're not into comparison. And each one of us was like that. Then somewhere along the line we lost it. We listened to other frightened or angry people and believed what they told us. Where did you lose your love for yourself? All right, what I'd like you to do now is to pick up your hand mirror, and I want you to look into your own eyes and say, I love and accept you exactly as you are. I want you to do this now. Go ahead. I love and accept you exactly as you are. Just notice your reactions. How do you react to doing this? How do you feel? What's coming up? Is it an easy exercise to do? Do you feel foolish? Does it seem hard to do? Does it make you feel angry? What sort of reactions are you having? I can remember when I used to criticize myself all the time when I looked in the mirror. I remember the endless hours I used to spend plucking my eyebrows to make myself barely acceptable. And I also remember I used to be frightened to look into my own eyes. Are you like that? Is this a difficult exercise? Because to me, this is one of our core issues, how we feel about ourselves. It's not important what's happening out there. It's not the size of our hips or our bank account or the fact that we have a lover or not, but how we feel about ourselves. Loving the self, to me, is the most important thing we can do. And this begins, as I said before, with no criticism. Do you criticize yourself? Oh, I've heard all the answers. Well, of course. I mean, how am I going to change if I don't? Well, if I don't do that, I won't be able to motivate myself. Doesn't everyone? Or I've always criticized myself. Well, we're not talking about everyone. We're talking about you. Everybody has their own answers and their own reasons. Why do you criticize yourself? What's wrong with you? In fact, at this point, I'd like you to stop and give yourself a little time to think and make a list of all the things that you think are wrong with you. And when you finish that, come back and we'll go on. Make a list of all the things you think are wrong with you. You will get the most out of this tape and the work we do if you allow yourself to take the time to do the exercises between the explanations. Now, let's talk about your list. Think about your list. Is it full of too short, too tall, too young, too old, too stupid, whatever? It always seems to be a lot of twos. And look at this list and notice, does it go with your should list? Are the items pretty much the same? See, it sounds to me like you're saying, I'm not good enough. And here we are again at the very bottom line, not loving ourselves. And this, to me, is the only real problem we have. Now, the next question is, where does this come from? Where do we get those ideas? How did we go from the perfection of a tiny baby who knew how wonderful it was to the feeling of being unlovable and unworthy and not good enough? You know, I like to think of us all as being like a rose. If you think of this flower, this gorgeous rose, from the time it is the tiniest little bud, as the petals begin to open, till it becomes a full blossom, till the last petal falls, a rose is always beautiful, always perfect, and ever changing. And this is the way we are. We are always perfect wherever we are in life. And we want to see ourselves that way in the here and now. Yes, of course there are things we want to change. We all have things we want to alter in our lives. But it doesn't mean that we're bad people. We don't have to come from a space of being wrong. So in order to release ourselves from the belief we have about ourselves that are limiting, we want to examine the past. We want to see what these blocks are. If we don't see them, there's no way we can remove them. So we look and we see what they are. What are the beliefs? What are the concepts? What are the ideas that are limiting us? And then we remove them. To me, it's rather like mental house cleaning. All of us have to clean house periodically. Some of us do it more often than others. But there comes a time when you really must clean the house, or it becomes impossible to live in. And I think it's the same thing with our mental houses. We need to periodically go through and do some house cleaning and toss out the old rubbish or the things that no longer suit us or no longer fit us. And we want to polish up those ideas that are positive and good and that nourish us and use them more often. You know, it really can be almost as easy as scraping bits of food off a plate into the trash after a meal. Now, you wouldn't go into yesterday's garbage to make tonight's meal. But how often do we go into yesterday's mental garbage to create tomorrow's experiences? The next exercise I'd like you to do is make a list of all the things your parents said were wrong with you, all the negative messages you got. Again, turn the tape off and give yourself a bit of time to really let things come up, things that were said or implied about your body, things that were said about your abilities, things that were said about love and money and your creative talents, and things like that. And of course, I know that your parents also said some wonderful things to you, but what we're really looking for are the negative messages that are probably still sitting in your subconscious mind. At this point, when I do this exercise in a workshop, it's interesting how the energy of the room usually begins to go down and people start to get very depressed. Now, you don't have to do that. You can look at this very objectively and just see what the messages are. Make your list of negative messages that came from your parents, verbal or implied, and do that now and then come back. All right, I want you to look at that list of negative messages, all the things that you heard as a child, because they're all sitting there in your subconscious mind, unless you've done something to release them and let them go. Try to be objective about it. And when you see something that creates a feeling within your body, let yourself say, oh, so that's where this belief came from. And realize that you're finding a treasure. Because if you don't know where this came from, you'd just be operating on automatic for the rest of your life and wondering why things aren't working for you, or wondering why you're always having the same experience. Well, I know why you repeat negative experiences. You're creating them because of some belief in here, and that belief came to you when you were very little. Not only from your parents, but now if you'll dig a little deeper, you'll find that it came from other sources too. So again, I want you to continue this list of negative messages and look for the other negative messages you heard as a child, mostly before the age of 10. Things that you heard from your relatives, from teachers, from friends, from authority figures, from the church. Take some time to do this, and as you're doing it, notice your body. Notice how your body is reacting and feeling. Make your list now of negative messages from other sources. You see, these messages that you have written down are the very thoughts that make you feel not good enough. If we had a 3-year-old child here in the middle of the room, and each one of us started to yell at the child and tell it how no good it was and how stupid it was and it shouldn't do this and it should do that and how dare it make a mistake and look at the mess it made, and maybe we hit that child a few times, what are we going to have? We're going to have a little child that cowers in the corner and behaves like a goody-goody, or we're going to have a child that tears up the room. They will go one of two ways, but there is no way we're ever going to know the potential of this child. However, if we take that same little child and we tell it how wonderful it is and how much we love it and how beautiful it is and that we just love the way it does things and we think it's so creative and that it's okay for this child to make mistakes while it learns, then the potential that can come out of this child will blow your mind. Now, each one of us is always working with the 3-year-old child within us. And most of us, unfortunately, spend our time yelling at the child, and then we wonder why our lives don't work. Maybe you were mistreated as a child. Maybe you were treated very badly, and that's sad. But if you're mistreating yourself in the here and now, then this is sadder still. So you have quite a list of negative messages now. Let's look at this list. Does this list go with your other list of what's wrong with you? And maybe even with your should list? I have a feeling it does. Our life scripts are based on our early messages. And until we can find those messages, we can't change our lives. But remember, all that is finished. It's over. It's in the past. And if we just go into blame, then we stay victim. And that's no fun. And you get to stay stuck in your problem. Blame keeps the problem. It keeps us stuck in the problem. And understanding lets us rise above it. The past cannot be changed. And the future is shaped by our current thinking. Our freedom in the here and now depends on our understanding our parents, having understanding and compassion for them instead of just blame. We want to know that, like us, they were doing the best they could at that point in time and space, with the understanding and awareness and knowledge that they had. Blame is not taking responsibility for ourselves and our own creative power. You see, they were just as frightened and scared as we are, and they could only teach us what they had been taught. What do you know about your parents' childhood before the age of 10? Think about it for a while. How much do you know? And if you don't know much and your parents are still alive, try to find out. Not in an accusing way, but just ask them, what was it like to be a little child? What was it like when you were 5 years old? And if your parents are gone and you can't find out from then let yourself imagine what it could be like. What kind of a childhood would your parents have had to have them be the sort of people they were when you were little? Understanding creates compassion. You see, you can't free yourself until you free them, and you can't forgive yourself until you forgive them.